Oskar Shumsky was an acclaimed American violinist, conductor, and influential pedagogue, revered by connoisseurs and fellow musicians alike for his impeccable technique, profound musical intellect, and uncompromising artistic integrity. He was an American violinist held in awe for his technical virtuosity, lyrical playing, and musical memory. In the words of his son Eric Shumsky, Oskar was a complete musician, an extraordinary string player, and a profound thinker. He was also an excellent violist and conductor. Quoting from The Guardian, his intensely communicative yet refined playing combined with the grand romantic tradition of Russian Jewish violinists, with the same dash of eloquence that characterized the playing of his idol Fritz Chrysler. His immaculate technical command was legendary, and his lyrical playing was distinguished by a luscious warmth and highly expressive intonation. Oskar Shumsky is unusual in that despite a bright start, his star only really rose when he was already in his 60s. How many other violinists can you name like that? Henry Roth states that many believe that he should have been recognised 40 years earlier than when the actual recognition truly came. This tells me that Oskar Shumsky was not in it for the fame. He was a true musician through and through. And the fame and recognition that came later in his life was a nice cherry on the cake for him that he did have to wait quite a long time for. In the meantime, he kept highly busy with musical activity, including teaching. Again quoting Roth, Shumsky was a superb artist and one of the finest America has produced. I want to dwell here on what is one of my favourite pieces by Chrysler specialist Oskar Shumsky, and that is the National Austrian Hymn. In my mind, as far as I'm concerned, this is the world's most beautiful national anthem. It was, of course, composed by Haydn, and in this Chrysler arrangement for violin with the double stops, it is highly, highly beautiful. But the anthem has some controversy and a rather dark cloud hanging over it because it was hijacked by the Nazis, of course, during the Third Reich. It makes me particularly sad when I hear it because I think of those Jews who fought and died faithfully for the fatherland, for the Kaiser in World War I, which included Chrysler, who fought in the Austrian army, and my great-grandfather, a Jew who fought in the German army, was twice wounded and was rewarded with the Iron Cross. So there's all kinds of mixed feelings that come up in my mind when I listen to this hymn, and in the hands of Shumsky it truly does fire my imagination. Let's go through the key events of his life. Oskar Shumsky was a violinist of a very high caliber. He was born on March 23rd, 1917 in Philadelphia and died on July 24th, 2000 in Rye, New York. He was an American violinist and conductor and also an excellent viola player, as we mentioned. Born to Russian Jewish parents, his father Isaac was a cabinet maker from Russia near Odessa, and apparently was a wonderful klezmer violinist with an exquisite sense of proportion and taste. Oskar Shumsky started learning the violin at the age of 3. According to Roth, his first teacher was Max Sinofsky. He also studied with Albert Meith, before ultimately going to the aged Leopold Auer. Hence this thought of the Russian school flowing through him. Not only was he of Russian heritage, but he had a great Russian teacher also. Shumsky made his debut at the age of 7 with the Philadelphia Orchestra under Leopold Stokowski, who declared him to be the most outstanding genius I've ever heard. That is some compliment. and that was back in 1925. Stokowski had heard Shumsky and then invited him to appear as soloist with the Philadelphia Orchestra to play Mozart's Violin Concerto No. 5 in A major. Fritz Chrysler was another star who took a special interest in Shumsky. He played Chrysler's own cadenzas to the Beethoven Violin Concerto to the great maestro. After learning them by ear, and Chrysler was super impressed with Shumsky. Chrysler also accompanied the young Shumsky at the piano. These meetings with Fritz Chrysler left a deep impression on Shumsky, who would go on to become a fantastic interpreter of Chrysler's vignette pieces. Shumsky's outstanding talent was recognised early, and in an era of such remarkable prodigies as Yehudi Menuhin, Ruggiero Ricci and Guido Bustabo, he held his own, even though Menuhin, Ricci and Stern would, perhaps unfairly, supersede Shumsky in terms of fame and recognition, certainly in the early years. From 1925, Shumsky went to Leopold Auer for lessons and studied at the Curtis Institute of Music from 1928 to 1936, continuing his studies with Ephraim Zimbalist after Auer's death in 1930. So that's quite a lengthy period of learning, maybe some 11 years or so, with these legendary violinists. As a child, Shumsky performed several hundred concerts, often appearing with the pianist and conductor Ernest Schelling, the founder of a series of young people's symphony concerts. This is how Shumsky got to meet Chrysler, because Schelling arranged for Shumsky to play to Fritz Chrysler. Apparently, when he played the cadenza for the Beethoven to Chrysler, this was at the time unpublished. Shumsky had heard Chrysler perform the concerto twice in concert and had reconstructed the cadenza from memory. There's a little bit of a sprinkle of genius in there, perhaps. Deeply impressed, Chrysler predicted that the young prodigy would become one of the finest violinists of the century. While he appeared as soloist with major orchestras, he apparently also possessed exceptional sight reading and ensemble skills. His New York debut came in 1934, followed by his Vienna debut in 1936, some 2 years before the Anschluss. He played first violin in the Primrose Quartet from 1939, and the same year joined the NBC Symphony Orchestra under Arturo Toscanini, where he would remain for 2 years. Toscanini had personally invited Shumsky to join the newly formed NBC Symphony. During the Second World War, like so many other violinists of the time, he served in the US forces, in his case, in the Navy. But I'm not sure if Shumsky was performing for the troops like Heifetz and Menuhin, or if he was actually fighting, or if he actually saw active service in the Navy. After serving in the US Navy during the Second World War, Shumsky resumed his concert career as a soloist. He was also in great demand for studio work and often led the RCA Victor Symphony and Columbia Symphony Orchestras. Later he was appointed as solo violinist for the NBC network in New York. During this golden age of American radio, he was featured weekly as soloist in radio broadcasts, often accompanied by Earl Wild at the piano. He taught at the Curtis Institute, Philadelphia, where he himself had been a student, but also at Peabody Conservatory, Baltimore, Yale University, and from 1953 at the prestigious Juilliard School in New York. From 1959 to 1967, he co-directed the Stratford Festival in Ontario, Canada with Glenn Gould, with whom he played regularly at the festival and made some recordings for TV broadcast. Around this time he appeared regularly as a soloist with American orchestras. He would also go on to take up the baton, and his conducting debut was in 1959 with the Canadian National Festival Orchestra. He later conducted the Orchestral Workshop of Westchester, the Westchester Symphony Orchestra and the Empire Sinfonietta in New York, as well as the New Jersey Colonial Symphony Orchestra. He joined the Bach Aria Group in the early 1960s as violinist and was granted a Ford Foundation Award in 1965. What about his students? Oskar Shumsky had established himself as a superb teacher at the Curtis, Juilliard and Peabody Conservatoires as well as at Yale. His students included Stephen Starrick, Elliot Chapo, Ida Kavafian, Eugene Drucker and Philip Setzer, the last two members of the Emerson Quartet. his advice to students was, instead of becoming a chronic contestant, adjust your sights to becoming a first-class instrumentalist and musician. After a long hiatus, Shumsky returned to concerts and recordings in 1981, performing in the USA and in Britain for the first time in 30 years. And a program that he gave for solo violin led to great acclaim. It is not common practice here for audience members to leap on their feet in acknowledgement of outstanding playing, and it is a mark of Oskar Shumsky's achievement at the Queen Elizabeth Hall that so many did spontaneously do just that. In terms of recordings, he recorded Eugene Issai's solo violin sonatas Opus 27 and Bach's sonatas and partitas for solo violin, the Beethoven Violin Concerto, Bach's single and double violin concertos, Mozart's fourth and fifth violin concertos and other works, including the two Brahms viola sonatas on the viola. Many of these recordings have not been released on CD, sadly. He also recorded the Glazunov Concerto, the complete Mozart violin sonatas with Artur Balsam, sonatas by Brahms, Grieg, Dohnanyi and Leo Weiner. He also made several discs of short pieces by Chrysler, those happen to be amongst my favourite, and the complete Brahms Hungarian dances. We'll go on to see the incredible violin that Shumsky owned, but this was perhaps what moved him to record the Rode studies. Shumsky's resurgence. Fortunately, in the autumn of his career, Shumsky was rewarded by a renewed interest in his artistry. In the early 1980s, he had resumed giving concerts after a lengthy absence. His appearances throughout Britain and continental Europe were an overwhelming success, prompting the London-based critic Dominic Gill to proclaim the most memorable musical events of 1982 as appearances by Horowitz, Michelangeli and Shumsky. So now we come on to Shumsky's violins. His violin was a Stradivari of 1715 known as the ex-Pierre Rode or the Duke of Cambridge, so hence a golden period Strad previously owned by Pierre Rode, famous 19th century violinist. This 1750 Rode ex Duke of Cambridge Strad was Shumsky's primary instrument, but he also used a modern Italian violin by Enrico Rocca. The Strad was what Shumsky used, of course, to record the complete 24 Caprices by Rode. What of Shumsky's style and personality? Well, as a musician, Shumsky was intensely focused. He was intolerant of showmanship. For him, music was not entertainment, and he abhorred the showbiz antics that characterized many musical performances in the late 20th century. His artistic demands could sometimes intimidate colleagues and students, and his uncompromising attitude would occasionally work to his disadvantage. Henry Roth has a fair bit to say about Shumsky, devotes 2 pages to him in his book Violin Virtuosos from page 271, and describes him as one of the most highly respected American-born violinists. As a chamber music player of extraordinary character, who played with tenderness and elegance, who held the practically unanimous enthusiasm of his professional colleagues, and who only really began to garner international recognition in his 60s. Roth describes his music as large-scale, tasteful, polished, stylish, rather than bravura, kamikaze, daredevilry or impassioned drama. He speaks of his silken tone as his style being not as sensuous or highly individualized as the top romantic violinists. That his platform image is described as severe, so similar to Heifetz in that regard, but does not have a musical personality as marked as that of Heifetz, Menuhin, Stern or Ricci. And that's perhaps why he didn't make it to the very top. Although a wonderful all-round violinist, he lacked perhaps that slight extra spark that these other guys had, although some are saying on YouTube that he belonged right up there alongside these guys. Roth highlights how good Shumsky is at Chrysler. And I've got to say, he reminds me a little bit of Aaron Rosand in the fact that he is an understated talent. Shumsky's family, well, he married Louise Sophia Carboni on October the 4th, 1939. I'm not sure if she was Jewish or maybe Italian by the sound of her name. Together they had 2 sons, Noel, a business executive and teacher, and Eric, a fine violist and teacher who recorded with his father. And in the words of Eric Shumsky, he describes his father this way. He says, "He was a great father, though we often had heated arguments." So what of Shumsky's other interests? His great love of nature helped him to see life in a very special way. And many of his fans do not realise that he was also a wonderful photographer. Shumsky had a curiosity with the world around him. He was drawn to biology and microbiology, which led him to the field of photomicroscopy. He would often find himself in a situation where he needed a special mounting to marry one optical device to another. He taught himself how to use a metal lathe and other machining tools to build whatever was needed to accomplish the task. So as well as being dedicated on the fiddle, he was a dedicated photographer too. Shumsky died aged 83. Many fellow violinists consider him to be one of the great violinists of the 20th century. David Oistrakh called him one of the world's greatest violinists. And the New Grove Dictionary says of him, he was a player of virtuoso technique, pure style, and refined taste, yet never sought recognition as a soloist, preferring to concentrate on teaching, chamber music playing and conducting. To once more quote the words of Eric, his son, students of Oskar Shumsky adored him and were in awe of his genius, great warmth and humour. He could play anything at sight on violin or viola at a level that was awesome indeed. He could also imitate any living violinist, good or bad, and put you on the floor with laughter with the candidness of imitation and the mannerisms he depicted. Some have said that he was underestimated and should have been rated more highly. For some reason, he was surpassed as an American violinist by the likes of Stern, Menuhin and Ricci. He performed with many great orchestras around the world. Musicians, including Stokowski, Chrysler, Oistrakh, Milstein and Menuhin, put Oskar Shumsky on the highest pedestal of music and concurred that he was one of the greatest violinists of the 20th century. His musical memory was staggering, and he could play entire passages of an orchestral score on the violin. Although he never became a household name like Heifetz or Perlman, Oskar Shumsky was the quintessential violinist's violinist, regarded by many musicians as one of the greatest 20th century exponents of his instrument. And I wonder, did he perhaps have a photographic memory, since he was able to memorize the then unpublished Beethoven cadenza composed by Chrysler?